we're going to be looking at side crow today. Last week we looked at crow. So if you haven't already had a look at that video, it's still on Instagram Live. It's on the Facebook page as well. So pop back through the feed and you'll see that as well. How I like to think about arm balances is, well, with all shapes really, those of you that know me know this is true. I like to think about the anatomy of the shape first of all. So how I'm going to get myself prepared to be in the shape. So what needs to be open first of all, to actually arrive into the most flexible range of motion that I can be in to get into the shape itself. Okay, so what has to be open? And then I'm thinking about what needs to be strong in the shape. Once I've opened up the body in the different directions that I need to, how do I engage the muscles? How do I train my body to be able to hold the shape? Because it's all very well being able to get into it, but if you can only hold it for a split second, that's when the risk of injury comes in, okay? And I see this again and again, people trying to race through to the end result. And sometimes it really pays to take your time and go slowly into it, okay? So I'm gonna show you the shape first of all, so that you can have an idea when I'm talking about what needs to be open and what needs to be strong, okay? So there's a couple of different ways that I've been taught along the way, and I'll show you roughly what they mean. The legs are together like this, so you're in a little squat, and my teacher always says that it's 1 part twist, 1 part squat, 1 part chaturanga, so 3 different parts. So I'm getting into my little squat here, okay, and then I'm twisting, and my hands come down. I'll teach you how to do it later. And you're coming into a chaturanga arm position, okay? So your arms are set up and your elbows are coming in as well. So those are the 3 actions that have to come together. So I've got to get my body ready for that. So what I like to think about in terms of preparation is, first of all, actually shoulder mobility. I feel like if I open up and move the shoulders and open up the tissue around the front and the back of the shoulders themselves, it gives me a little bit more freedom to get into my twist. So I'll often start with working with this shape here. Okay, so bringing the hands together behind the back. And you can always bring a t-shirt or strap in between the hands here as well. And it just mobilizes the shoulders a little for us. So I'll spend some time in the beginning of a warm-up doing this, and maybe even integrate it into some crescents or low crescents as well. And then eagle arms is a big favorite of mine. For any of the arm balances, actually, just for that practice of rounding the upper back, which has to kind of happen to get into some of these shapes here. So it's a squeezing of the arms in and a lifting up of the fingers, and you want to keep the throat nice and open. So those are pretty nice for me. Something that often restricts us from getting into the shape is the flexibility of the spine and the tissues, particularly around the lower back and side stomach. So I'll always start with a really nice, simple side body stretch, okay? And I'll do 2-3 rounds in each direction. And as you know, each time you come to a shape again and again, you naturally start to find a little bit more space in both the fascia and the muscles combined here. So that's a really nice one to come into. So you can do that. And then a twist, really nice seated twist. So simple twist would be sitting tall, just moving straight from your side body stretch, and then leaning around and using your arms as a lever, finding a little bit of mobility. And this would be where I would start anyway for a warm-up phase. And both directions, obviously. And then what I tend to do when I get to the moving part of the practice, where I'm preparing and building heat in my body with the sun salutations, is I'm thinking, where can I integrate some of those things that I've just shown you into the practice? So I'm not only getting warm in the legs, but I'm also kind of replicating some of those simple shapes. So I'm always thinking, how can I have the simple shapes that are similar to the more complicated shape woven all the way through the practice, okay? So before I get too lost in this, coming into a low crescent is nice, but how about then adding in a twist, yeah? Coming in and working with a little bit of leverage here. And then also that accesses the outer hip, which you'll see is really, really helpful for this shape. So thinking of shapes that look like this, okay? So you've got the low crescent, can also be up a little bit higher, coming into this one here as well. And then a similar shape might be coming into a revolved chair, okay, keeping the knees together. So it's repetitions of those patterns. And then another one, while I just remember, that I like to do a lot is to come into something like this, and I'm leaning back. So I'm opening up through the hip flexors, which actually will work in the shape, but I'm getting into the spine a little, and then I'll come in to the twist, okay? So I'm a big fan of multitasking as I prepare for my shapes. So I really like to open up the outer hip to get into this particular shape, because there's a lot of twist, and we don't want to be pulling in this area, and it's often an area that's very, very tight for lots of us, okay? So, all right, someone being a little annoying on the group page. So outer hip is really nice. So pigeon shape can be really nice to spend some time in before, just maybe 5 to 10 breaths to open that up as well. So combining those twists, looking at the outer hip work, and that's going to get you nice and warm to be in it. And then let's think about how we can stay strong in the shape, okay? So all of those repetitions of twists that we're coming to in the warm-up phase and all the way through the practice, they're getting our transverse abdominis, the deeper lower core muscles here, and the rectus abdominis up here, nice and used to switching on, which then fires up the spinous erectors muscles that's along the length of the back of the spine as well. And then every time we're twisting, we're engaging the obliques, so internal and external. So that's kind of this whole corset of engagement in terms of the core muscles around the front, the back, and the side of the body. And then when we're in the shape itself, if we've taught these muscles how to fire up properly, then they're going to hold us in the shape, okay? So then we just have to think about that openness in the chest, which comes with the twisting as well. And then when we're in the shape like this, we need to be squeezing the inner thighs in towards each other, okay? So we want to be firing up the adductor muscles here as well. So it's a squeezing of the legs in towards each other. So you'll remember in chair pose, teachers are often telling you, when you come into revolve chair, make sure that that back knee, the one that you're twisting away from, doesn't creep forward. So it's the same thing with side crow. What will tend to happen if you look at my knees here is that as I twist, they separate and one comes apart. And that means you're putting a lot more pressure into the wrists here as well. So we're trying to think about how to be efficient with our shapes, how we can spread the load of effort. So I want you to almost imagine when you're in the shape that you're squeezing a block in between your thighs, okay? Some of you practiced a 20-minute class with me where that's all we did, was squeezing blocks in between the thighs. So you want to be really nice and strong in that, the adductor muscle area there, okay? So that's our preparations in terms of warmth and openness, and then of course being in it. And then I talked about 6 elements to arm balances last week, and I'm just, because there's a few more faces here this time, I'm going to run through the 5 foundations again, the 5 elements. So first foundation of any arm balance is your hands, okay? So I'm always reminding people right from the beginning, spread the fingers as wide as you can. And you're going to be pushing down through the heel of the hand, the knuckles of the fingers here, and then the fingertips, okay? So everything is connecting to the ground. And by doing that, you're spreading the distribution of weight, the distribution of force, okay? So the wrists are protected a little bit more. Now, when you're in the shape, it might be that the middle part comes up a little, but that's okay. You're still setting the intention of fingers wide, okay? Second of the elements is the adduction. So that's the bringing of the inner thighs towards each other, which I talked about already. And the third element is core. So you are familiar with the words of Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha. And often I'll teach that in a simplified way by telling students to draw the belly in and up. So it's 2 energetic locks. And we're drawing energy, power into these areas down here. And we want to conserve the energy here because it's the power of these bandhas that's going to help us with the lift, as well as the switching on of the muscles across the body to get into this shape, okay? So third element is core, so it's lifting. Fourth element is the twist in this one, okay? If you remember in crow pose, it was the rounding of the spine to get into it. But this one is the twist element, okay? So number 4 is twist. And then we have to lift the hips up. So if I were to talk you through and show you at the same time what's going on, okay, I'm in my squat. Sitting up tall. I have the twist, which is the fourth element. My belly's drawn in and up, which is the third element. I'm squeezing the inner thighs in towards each other, which is the second. And then my foundations, my hands are on the ground, okay? So they're nice and steady. And then to be able to rest this big bone, the femur bone, on the back of my triceps, the arms, okay, either one or two, we'll look at that in a minute. I need to lift the hips up. So there has to be a feeling of lifting, because if I try to go from here, I'm probably going to not get so easily into it. So there's a lifting of the hips. And then with all arm balances, if we look down, that's where we're going to go. So we're looking much further forward than we need to, okay, than we think we need to. All right. So those are the foundations, and I'll talk you through those again in a minute. I think it's nice to remember those things as you're going through the shapes. Okay. So ways we can make the shape easier are with blocks and then kind of baby steps towards the shape. So I'm going to look at those. And then once I've shown you those options, I'm going to show you some options that would take you past the shape itself as well. Okay. So first of all, there's two ways that I do this. With people who are newer, I tend to try to get you to set up the femur bone to rest on the back of both of your arms, because then there's a feeling of, okay, cool, my arms are working, both of them. I know what they're doing. Because if we rest just one arm on the leg and this arm is free, a lot of people, I see the arm flies out like this, and that's what lets the shape down. So let me show you both ways, and then you'll see what suits you best. So this is the shape itself. I'm coming into my squat, so part one of the practice. My thighs are switched on, so I'm engaging the adductors, okay? I'm nice and long in the spine, belly's drawn in and up, and I'm twisting to the side. I'm spreading my hands nice and wide, and my elbow is in a position where I can hook the femur bone above the elbow on both sides. So I'm spreading my fingers wide, lifting my hips, okay, squeezing legs in, chaturanga arms, I'm ready to go. I lean in and I'm resting everything now onto my upper arms, and I'm looking forward, and then I start to lean forward. I'm still squeezing my feet together, I'm still squeezing my thighs, and you'll see that when you do all of those different components, the feet kind of very effortlessly lift away from the floor. Okay, you become lighter. You've distributed the load in different places, so the feet just pop up. And then other people have had trouble getting into it like that. It's a strong twist, remember. So sometimes an easier way for people, and sometimes harder, is working with just one arm. So let me show you that. Setup is the same, twisting around more, and then one arm is away from the leg. So you can see that this arm is over here, and I've got the back of this tricep about halfway down the legs. In fact, I'm going to show you on this side, okay? So I've got my hand secure. The other hand is away from the leg, and I'm lifting up in the same way, leaning in, but this time I'm just hooking onto the outside of the right arm, and then the feet are lifting away from the floor, okay? And this arm is drawing into a chaturanga, but a little bit wider, okay? All right, so that's the actual shape itself. So two different options with the arms. Looking at ways that we can make it easier. So a block under the feet can be really, really handy for the shape itself. And then taking it back even to a simpler level again, what I will do with people who are struggling with how it feels to be in the shape, and this is why I do repetition throughout the practice to warm the body up, so people have felt the shape in different directions. But if people are still not feeling it when they come to the shape itself, I sit them on a block and I bring the knees in towards the chest. So the femur bone is in flexion, the legs are coming in towards the chest. I'm squeezing the thighs in, so it's pretty active. And then I'm bringing the hands to heart center. And I'm getting people to twist and lean and hook the elbow to the outside of the knee. And they're practicing this, okay? And by practicing this, it's still engaging all of the things that need to happen. It's just a different direction of gravity, okay? So my belly is still drawn in and I'm lifting up. I've still got the twist element. I'm still adducting, so the inner thighs are still squeezing in towards each other. And my hands are still wide and pushing into something, but actually I'm just using that as a rotational trick right now. Okay, you can then get them to practice being like this, fingers wide. And then it feels like when they come to the shape in a different direction, a little bit less scary. Okay, so remember arm balances, there's a big element of fear that comes with them sometimes. So this is what we're trying to break down and release. So I feel like I'm racing at 100 miles an hour. So if you have questions, send me messages and I'll come and have a look in a minute. So I'm going to come on to the block with my feet here. Okay, still squeezing in, spine long. I'm twisting to the side. I'm going to show you with both arms connected to the femur for this one. And this one just gives you a little bit more lift. So it's easier then to get that twist and to lower your way down. Okay, so this can feel nice for some people. Squeezing legs in. Remember, I've got to lift, bend the elbows, hook on to the arm, look forward, and then squeeze, 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 lean, look, and lift. Okay, so with the block can be quite nice under there. Now, those are the ways in which you can simplify the shape. I have sometimes found that people struggle to get into it this way. And it seems a bit strange, but somehow mentally chair pose is easier for them. So they come into a chair and they twist. And then they're coming into it from up rather than down to up. So coming from here and then placing the hands down, they're already with the hips lifted. And then they're just leaning in. It's just a different access point, okay? So it's an option to play around with for sure. I'm just gonna come and see if anyone has any questions. Nope. Cool, we're good. All right, so those are my tips on how to simplify and how to access it from a functional perspective. So I want to just play around with a couple of variations now. So a lot of people come to class and I'm often teaching people who are teaching people as well. And when you're in a multi-level class, some people will want to do more than just side crows. So for those of you who are watching and want a little bit more, here's another option that I've been playing around with lately. And it's kind of fun. And actually, when wrists are a bit tender, this option can feel like it's easier to get into because there's not the wrist trouble, okay? So funky arm side crow. I'm coming into the same setup. So remember those 6 foundations that I talked about. They're always valid. Spine long, legs adducted, belly drawn in and up, so banders are engaged. I'm twisting, but this time instead of having the hands down, I'm securing the tricep to the outer hip, and I'm taking this arm and I'm putting the forearm down on the floor, okay? And I am then gonna look forward, lean forward, and I'm picking the feet up in that direction, okay? Can play around with straightening the legs out or keeping them bent, okay? So that's an option. So let me just run through that again. Setup is exactly the same. Twisting, belly in, side stomach engaged, all of those good things. Setting your hands up, setting your twist up, but then forearm comes down. Looking forward in the same way, still with hands wide, leaning forward, squeezing, and lifting, okay? So this is one option. Another option which has been coming up again and again in our Zoom classes is with eagle legs, okay? So eagle legs, if you remember, is where you are wrapping the legs around like this, okay? And then obviously when you're in the full extension or expression of the practice, you're with the arms as well. It's really easy to do in a side crow setup. So let me show you how that looks. So you need to come into the twist of the legs, but I find that I have to unhook the foot so that I can get into the shape and then reattach the hook or that was good English, wasn't it? Re-wrap the foot around, you'll see in a minute. So if I cross the leg over, I'm now unhooking the foot just to get into it easier. I've got right leg on top. I'm sinking down into my semi-squat. So remember, it's 1 part twist, 1 part squat. And my leg is released, but I'm set up pretty much the same. I'm actually going to do it with funky arms rather than hands, just because my wrist is a little tender today. Okay, so I'm leaning in, setup is the same, and then I'm picking the foot up and I'm twisting the leg back around each other. Okay, so I'm looking into it from here. Same thing, obviously, can be done on hands as well. Okay, so there's an eagle legs opportunity there as well. And then a lot of us have been coming into legs straight. So I showed you that over to the side. Let me see if I can come into that. I'm going to do 2 arms again just because of my wrist at the moment. So I'm coming into the setup in the same way. I'm looking forward, leaning forward. And then you're going to straighten the legs out and you're really going to flex the feet. Flexing the feet is going to then switch on the quad muscle above the knee, which is responsible for straightening the leg. And it just gives you a bit more of a spread in terms of muscle load. Okay, so that's your third option. And then the final option is coming into Ekapada Kunyasya. So let me show you this one. And I'm going to come to a slight angle to show you this. So really, side crow is such a foundational shape. So crow pose or bakasana is that foundational arm balance. It's that entry point into playing with arm balances. And I feel like the side crow is the entry point into all of the other twisting arm balances that come to play. And when you can master both of those, and by master, I mean understand the foundations and begin the practice, it opens you up to so much more in terms of transitions and playfulness within the practice as well, which ultimately comes to build our confidence as a practitioner. And remember, it doesn't really matter how beautiful you look in the shape. A lot of this is about transitioning the confidence and the ability to kind of pick yourself up and keep on going and going into your life away from the practice as well. So it's not just about the physical shapes. So it's the journey and the process, the commitment, and that sense of tapas. Okay. All right. So one last shape. Thighs are drawing in towards each other. Okay. Hands are ready. Belly draws in and up. Bandhas are engaged. Ready. I'm going to twist. So the spine is in place. And I'm setting my hands wide, first foundation. I'm lifting the hips. I'm looking further forward than I need to. And then to begin with, I'm just coming into side crow. And then what I like to think about here is taking that back leg, reaching it back, flexing the foot, which again straightens out the leg and the quad. And then the leg that's resting on the arms, I'm going to be reaching that foot away as well. So both legs are straight, okay? Toes pointing towards us helps to switch on the quad muscles here. And that gives us a way into that shape, okay? So I'll be breaking down that shape in another day because there's a lot of things that we can go on to from there. But that should give you lots and lots of stuff to get started and playing with, okay? So keep in mind those 6 foundations. Hands wide, belly drawn in and up, inner thighs squeezing together as if you're holding a block in place, okay? You've got the lengthening of the spine before any twist and then the twist. So you're strong in the obliques as well as front and back core muscles, okay? And remember, you've got to lift the hips up to get into the fold, okay? So taking your time with that. And remember, you don't need to go to the deepest expression, yeah? Just playing, seeing what happens. Any questions, type them down. Any feedback, I would love. Thank you for joining me, okay? I'll see you next Wednesday. Take care, guys.